"Huh, too bad things didn't turn out the way you expected," my husband smirked, his words dripping with disdain. "I'll just file those divorce papers and disappear," he added casually. I stared at him, struggling to process what I was hearing. Austin had changed the moment my father-in-law was admitted to the hospital. This wasn't the man I thought I had married. "Austin and I will be dividing his inheritance," my mother-in-law chimed in coldly. "You won't get a single cent. There's no money for a wife who can't even manage her own housework." I was speechless. But when I went to City Hall to file for divorce, I uncovered a shocking truth. My name is Lindsay, and I'm a 24-year-old housewife. My husband, Austin, is 40. People called ours a May-December romance, but there was no whirlwind courtship like in the movies, it just happened. I first met Austin's father while working at his construction company. For some reason, he took a liking to me right away and repeatedly suggested that I marry his son. Austin was expected to take over the company, but with no marriage prospects in sight, his father grew increasingly worried. He feared that the business he had worked so hard to build would collapse without an heir. He even went so far as to visit my family, requesting my hand in marriage. My father, who also owned a construction company, had once worked under Austin's father, learning the ropes of the business. Perhaps out of gratitude, or obligation, he agreed to at least hear him out. But the age gap made him hesitant. "I want to respect both Austin's and Lindsay's choices," my father said. "They should date first. If they decide to marry, we'll discuss it then." Austin, knowing that our marriage was the key to his inheritance, readily agreed. During our courtship, we got along well. We went on dates, to dinner, movies, shopping, and slowly grew comfortable with each other. It wasn't exactly a fairy tale, but I convinced myself that we would make it work. Before long, we were engaged. Then, everything changed. Austin's father fell ill and was frequently in and out of the hospital. Since Austin was busy with work and my mother-in-law didn't drive, I, his fiancée, became the one to care for him. "You should focus more on housework," my mother-in-law would say with a sneer. "You're going to be my daughter-in-law soon, after all." She constantly belittled me, treating me like a servant, but I endured it. Yes, I'm coming, I'll start the car," I would reply, rushing to take my father-in-law to the hospital. One day, my mother-in-law suggested I move in early, claiming it would be easier for me to care for him. I agreed, thinking it would be less of a hassle than commuting. After all, the wedding would happen soon, right? So why not just sign the marriage papers? I reasoned. Once I started living with Austin, I realized why he had never been in a serious relationship. He was obsessively frugal. He meticulously recorded every expense from our dates, tracking how much he spent on me, on food, even on gas. Yet, when it came to his mother, he never hesitated. She splurged on luxury brands and extravagant vacations, and he never once complained. That's when it hit me, Austin wasn't just a penny pincher, he was a mama's boy. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. I had made my choice, hadn't I? Besides, my father and father-in-law supported this marriage, and despite everything, my father-in-law's kindness was the one thing that kept me going. Until that morning. I was getting ready to take my father-in-law to the hospital when my mother-in-law's sharp voice cut through the silence. "Lindsay, have you made breakfast yet? And the way you cleaned yesterday was unacceptable. Hurry up and redo it." She lounged in front of the television, contributing nothing but complaints. Austin sat beside her, glued to the screen. I clenched my fists. "I'm sorry, but I don't have time. Your husband needs to go to the hospital." For once, I didn't back down. And that was the moment I realized, I wasn't just trapped in a bad marriage, I was suffocating. "Oh, well then, shouldn't you have woken up earlier? I have to go out too," I replied, meeting my mother-in-law's cold gaze. "Make us breakfast before you leave," she snapped. I glanced at Austin and his mother, sitting there without a care in the world while my father-in-law, their husband and father, was unwell. The least they could do was help. Still, I swallowed my frustration and turned to my father-in-law. "Please wait just a moment, I'll be done soon," I assured him before rushing to make breakfast. After quickly preparing their meal, I served it to Austin and his mother. Then, I hurried back to my father-in-law, gently helping him to his feet. "I'm sorry for making you do so much," he murmured, guilt weighing on his voice. "I should apologize to your father too." And then, right before my eyes, he collapsed. "Are you okay?" I gasped, panic surging through me. But my husband and mother-in-law, they didn't so much as flinch. They kept eating as if nothing had happened. Shaking off my disbelief, I grabbed my phone and called an ambulance. My mind was a blur until I heard the distant wail of sirens. When the paramedics arrived minutes later, my mother-in-law barely spared a glance. "Sorry, Lindsay, I have plans, you handle the rest," she said, standing up. Austin followed her lead. "I have work to do, so make sure you lock up," he added nonchalantly before they both walked out, abandoning me and my father-in-law. At the hospital, my father-in-law eventually regained consciousness and was admitted for further observation. By the time the paperwork and doctor's explanations were done, night had already fallen. As I sat beside him, he reached for my hand, his grip weak but firm. "If something happens to me, I'll leave you something, Lindsay," he said softly. "It's my way of apologizing for making you endure my ungrateful son and wife. I suppose I was too focused on work to realize what was happening in my own home." His words were heavy with regret. Just then, I heard someone clear their throat by the door. I turned to see Austin and my mother-in-law walking in. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had come because they were genuinely concerned. "He'll be fine," I reassured them. "The doctor said he just needs rest. He'll be discharged in a few days." I thought they would be relieved, but then, was it my imagination, or did Austin click his tongue? And was that disappointment on my mother-in-law's face? Something felt off. A few days later, just as I was about to leave for the hospital, Austin and his mother handed me a document. "Take this to the government office and submit it," my mother-in-law instructed. I glanced down. Green ruled lines. A divorce decree. Before I could react, Austin spoke, his tone dripping with mockery. "I overheard everything in my father's hospital room. The old man got weak and said he'd leave you something. But let me make this clear, you're not getting a dime. Wasn't that your plan all along? Marrying an older man for his inheritance? Too bad it backfired. File the divorce papers and disappear." He spat out the words, laced with disgust. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "What?" I gasped. "How can you say that?" But before I could fully process his cruelty, his mother piled on. "Austin and I are dividing the inheritance. There's no one else to share it with, and certainly no money for a wife who can't even handle housework." Their words turned my stomach. My father-in-law wasn't even out of the hospital yet, but they spoke as if he were already dead. It was sickening. "How can you be so heartless? He's your family, he's not going to die, he'll come home and recover," I snapped. "And don't you dare accuse me of chasing after money, that was never my intention." I refused to let them win. With my hands shaking, I filled out the divorce papers as quickly as possible. I wanted them out of my life now. I stormed to the municipal office and handed over the document, my heart pounding. But then, the receptionist frowned. "Miss, there's a problem with this form," he said. Confused, I asked, "What do you mean? Is something missing?" He hesitated before asking, "Can you confirm your name?" I did. Then he asked for my maiden name. When I gave it to him, he let out a small chuckle. "Your marriage certificate was never submitted," he revealed. "Legally, you were never married." My breath caught. I wasn't sure if I was horrified, relieved, or enraged. The receptionist slid the completed divorce form back to me. Still reeling, I called my mother-in-law for answers. She answered casually, as if none of this was a big deal. "Oh, I completely forgot. I had the marriage certificate all this time." She forgot? Liar. "You did this on purpose. You only saw me as free labor," I shouted, unable to hold back my fury. Her laughter rang through the phone, joined by Austin's. "Well, it'd be hard to order a stranger around, wouldn't it?" she taunted. "But a wife would do anything for me." That was it. I clenched my fists, my blood boiling. I wouldn't let them get away with this. Without wasting another second, I called my father and asked him to meet me at the government office. When I explained the situation, he dropped everything and came immediately. Together, we had the official confirm the facts once more. We even requested a certificate of residence, proving beyond a doubt that Austin's marital status had never changed. I had been living a lie. A pawn in their twisted game. But now? Now, it was my turn to fight back. I had been forced into the role of a wife, worked tirelessly, and then discarded the moment an inheritance came into play. Even my normally mild-mannered father was enraged. Together, we rushed to the hospital where my father-in-law was recovering. When we entered his room, he looked up and said, "You didn't have to come all this way." But as my father explained the full extent of the deception, my father-in-law's expression darkened, his hands clenched into fists, and I could see his frustration mounting. We sat in his hospital room, discussing how to deal with Austin and my mother-in-law. Neither of them had visited him even once since he was hospitalized. Then, my father-in-law made an unexpected proposal. Austin is unfit to run the company, he admitted. I had hoped he'd grow into the role, but I see now that it's impossible. If he takes over, the business will crumble, and the employees will leave. I'd rather entrust the company to you, sir. He looked directly at my father. Merging the business with my father's company was a logical solution. The company was profitable, and this way, it would continue to thrive under competent leadership. This isn't just a difficult decision, my father-in-law added, but one necessary for the future. Then, to my shock, he suddenly laughed. As for my wife, she's so obsessed with money that she's been living in luxury, ignoring her hospitalized husband. She deserves this. His voice was cold, resolute. Then, he turned to me and my father. Is this enough to make up for all the trouble I caused you? My father and I exchanged glances. Small smiles tugged at the corners of our lips. Yes, this was more than enough. The next day, my father's legal and financial team sprang into action. It was finalized, the company would merge under my father's management, retaining its original name. Austin, who had been vice president in name only, was fired immediately. His replacement was an experienced executive from my father's firm. My father-in-law would officially sign off on everything once he returned to work. Austin and his mother had no idea what was coming. The countdown to their downfall had begun. 2 weeks later, my father-in-law had fully recovered. My father and I completed his discharge procedures and drove him home. When we arrived, my mother-in-law was gone, and Austin was at work as usual. Cruel people. They had no idea that by tomorrow, their entire world would collapse. The following morning, I returned to my original job. The atmosphere in the office was tense yet electric. The new vice president was already settling in. Then, in a packed conference room, my father-in-law opened the morning meeting. He announced the company's merger and officially declared Austin's termination. Right on cue, the door burst open. Austin stormed in, a letter of termination crumpled in his hand. His mother followed, clutching a divorce decree. Dad, what the hell is this? Austin bellowed. Why didn't I hear about this? His mother's shrill voice cut in. What is going on? How could you do this to us? They were unraveling, right in front of everyone. Exactly the kind of meltdown I had been waiting for. Then, as if on cue, their eyes locked onto me. It's you, they shrieked. You set this up because you didn't get your inheritance. I met their hysteria with a calm, unwavering gaze. I didn't do anything, I said simply. You did this to yourselves. My father-in-law's voice cut through the chaos like ice. Enough, his glare could have frozen flames. You're disrupting my morning meeting, get out. Employees rushed to escort Austin and his mother out of the room. Their protests echoed down the hall, but no one cared. My father-in-law turned back to the staff, apologized for the disruption, and smoothly resumed the meeting. Just like that, Austin and his mother had been erased from the company. Even after their disgrace, they lingered around, desperately trying to beg for forgiveness. But I ignored them. I had no intention of accepting their apologies. Security eventually barred them from entering the company premises. Shortly after, they were forced out of their home. From what I heard, they were now holed up in a rundown apartment near their former house, an ironic twist of fate for people so obsessed with money. As for me, I had returned to my peaceful life as an office worker, free from their torment. My father, however, wasn't done yet. He was preparing to file a legal claim for damages against both Austin and my mother-in-law. They had lost everything, their wealth, their status, and their futures. This was just the beginning of their descent into hell. And I had no plans to save them. After all, the way you treat people will always come back to haunt you.